Today we continue my interview with Nathan Labenz, AI entrepreneur, AI scout, and host of The Cognitive Revolution. If you missed part 1, do go back and listen to it. That's episode 176, Nathan Labenz on the final push for AGI and understanding OpenAI's leadership drama.
AI discourse.
It seems to me, and I think to quite a lot of people, that the online conversation about AI and AI safety and pausing AI versus not has kind of gotten a bit worse over the last couple of months. That the conversation has gotten more aggressive. People who I think know less have become more vocal. People have been pushed a bit more into ideological corners. It's kind of now you know what everyone is going to say, kind of maybe before they've had much to say about it yet. Whereas a year ago, even 6 months ago, it felt a lot more open. People were toying with ideas a lot more. It was less aggressive. People were more open-minded. Firstly, is that your perception? And if so, do you have a theory as to what's going on?
That is my perception, unfortunately. And I guess my simple explanation for it would be that it's starting to get real and there's starting to be actual government interest. And, when you start to see these congressional hearings and then you start to see voluntary White House commitments, and then you see an executive order, which is largely, just a few reporting requirements for the most part, but still is kind of the beginning. Then, anything around politics and government is generally so polarized and kind of ideological that maybe people are starting to just kind of fall back into those frames. That's my theory. I don't have a great theory, or I'm not super confident in that theory. There are definitely some thought leaders, that are particularly aggressive in terms of pushing an agenda right now. I'm not breaking any news to say Mark Andreessen has put out some pretty aggressive rhetoric over the last, I think just within the last month or two. The Techno Optimist Manifesto, where I'm I agree with you on 80, maybe even 90% of this. We've covered the self-driving cars, and there's plenty of other things where I think, man, it's a real bummer that we don't have more nuclear power. And I'm very inclined to agree on most things.
Shame we can't build apartments.
Yeah, for God's sake. But I don't think he's done the discourse any favors by framing the debate in terms of he used the term the enemy, and he just listed out a bunch of people that he perceives to be the enemy. And that really sucks. I think if the kind of classic thought experiment here is if aliens came to Earth, we would hopefully all by default think that we were in it together, and we would want to understand them first and, what their intentions are and whether they would be, friendly to us or hostile to us or whatever, and really need to understand that before deciding what to do. Unfortunately, it feels like that's kind of the situation that we're in. The aliens are of our own creation, but they are these sort of strange things that are not very well understood yet. We don't really know why they do what they do, although we are making a lot of progress on that. I don't think it's helping anybody for technology leaders to be giving out their lists of enemies. I don't really think anybody needs to be giving out our lists of enemies. It would be so tragicomic, if you imagine actual aliens showing up to then imagine the people calling each other names and, deciding who's enemies of whom before we've even figured out what the aliens are here for. And so I feel like we're kind of behaving really badly, honestly, to be dividing into camps before we've even got a clear picture of
what we're dealing with.
Yeah. That's just crazy to me. And yeah, it's exactly why it's happening. I think there have been a few quite negative contributions, but it also does just seem to be where society is at right now. We saw the same thing with vaccines, right? I'm not a super vaccine expert, but safe to say that discourse was also unhealthy, right? We had
I could find certain areas for improvement.
Yeah, we had a deadly disease, and then we had life-saving medicine. And, I think it's totally appropriate to ask some questions about that life-saving medicine and its safety and possible side effects. I think the just asking questions defense, I'm actually kind of sympathetic to, but the discourse was, safe to say it was pretty deranged. And, here we are again, where it seems like there's really no obvious reason for people to be so polarized about this, but it is happening. And, I don't know that there's all that much that can be done about it. I think, my kind of best hope for the moment is just that the extreme techno-optimist, techno-libertarian, don't tread on me, right to bear AI faction is potentially just self-discrediting. I really don't think that's the right way forward. And if anything, I think they may end up being harmful to their own goals, just like the OpenAI board was perhaps harmful to its own goals. When you have leading billionaire, chief of major VC funds saying such extreme things, it really does invite the government to kind of come back and be like, oh, really? That's what you think? That's what you're going to do if we don't, put any controls on you? Well, then guess what? You're getting them. It doesn't seem like good strategy. It's like, it may be a good strategy for like deal flow if your goal is to attract like other sort of uber ambitious founder types that don't, if you just want like Travis Kalanick to, choose your firm in his next venture, and you want that type of person to like take your money, then maybe it's good for that. But if you actually are trying to convince the policymakers that regulation is not needed, then I don't think you're on the path to being effective there. So it's very strange. It's very kind of hard to figure out.
Self-driving cars.
I think I have a somewhat contrarian take on this because it does still seem like the predominant view is that it's going to be a while still. And, obviously Cruise has recently had a lot of problems due to one incident, plus perhaps maybe a cover up of that incident. I still don't have it entirely clear exactly what happened there, but I'm a little confused by this because yes, the leading makers, and that would be like Tesla, Waymo, and Cruise, have put out numbers that say pretty clearly that they are safer than human drivers. And they can measure this, in a bunch of different ways. It can be kind of complicated. Exactly what do you compare to and under what conditions? The AI doesn't have to drive in like extreme conditions, so it can just turn off. And this is why I think probably China will beat us in the self-driving car race, if not the AI race overall, is because I think they'll go around and just like change the environment, right? And say, oh my God, if we have trees, blocking stop signs, or we have stop signs that are ambiguous, or we have like whatever these, sort of environmental problems, then we should fix them. We should clean up the environment so it works well. And we just have seemingly no will here, certainly in the United States, to do that sort of thing. So I'm bummed by that. And I really try to carry that flag proudly too, because I think, so many people have these like, this is a problem in society at large, right? It's not just an AI problem, but people get invested in terms of their identity on different sides of issues, and everybody kind of seems to polarize and go to their coalition on kind of questions which aren't like obviously related. So I try to emphasize the places where I think just sane first principles thinking kind of breaks those norms. And one, I think, is self-driving cars really good. I would love to see those accelerated. I would love to have one. It would be more useful to me if Tesla actually made it more autonomous. Probably the biggest reason I haven't bought one is that it still really requires you to pay close attention. And I'm a competent driver, but we have a couple members of our family who are not great drivers, and whom I'm like, this would be a real benefit to their safety. But one of the problems is if it requires you to monitor it so closely. And if you kind of lapse or don't monitor it in just the way that you want, it gives you a strike. And after a few strikes, they just kick you off the self-driving program. So I'm like, unfortunately, I think with the drivers that I have that would actually be, most benefited from this, we'd probably end up getting kicked out of the program, and then it would have been pointless to have bought one in the first place. So, I would endorse giving more autonomy to the car. And I think that would make people in my personal family safer. but, we're just not there. And I hold that belief at the same time, as all these kind of more cautious beliefs that I have around like super general systems. And, there's reasons for that are like, I think pretty obvious really, but for some reason don't seem to carry the day. The main one is that driving cars is already very dangerous. A lot of people die from it, and it's already very random, and it's not fair. It's already not just. So if you could make it less dangerous, make it more safe overall, even if there continues to be some unfairness and some injustice and some, literal harms to people, that seems to be good, and there's really no risk of like a self-driving car taking over the world, or doing anything like it's not going to get totally out of our control. It can only do one thing. It's an engineered system with a very specific purpose, right? It's not going to start doing science one day by surprise. So I think like that's all very good. We should embrace that type of technology. And I try to be an example of, holding that belief and championing that at the same time as saying, hey, something that can do science, and pursue long range goals of arbitrary specification, that is like a whole different kind of animal.
Robotics.
One more very particular thing I wanted to shout out too, because this is one of the few examples where GPT-4 has genuinely outperformed human experts, is from a paper called Eureka, I think a very appropriate title, from Jim Phan's group at NVIDIA. And what they did is used GPT-4 to write the reward models, which are then used to train a robotic hand. And so, one of the tasks that they were able to get a robotic hand to do is twirl a pencil in the hand. And this is something that like I'm not very good at doing. But it's this sort of thing, right? Wobbling it around the fingers. What's hard about this is multiple things, of course, but one thing that's particularly hard if you're going to try to use reinforcement learning to teach a robot to do this is you have to have a reward function that tells the system how well it's doing. So these systems learn by just kind of fumbling around and then getting a reward and then updating so as to do more of the things that get the high reward and less of the things that get the low reward. But in the initial fumbling around, it's kind of hard to tell, like, was that good? Was that bad? You're nowhere close. So they call this the sparse reward problem, or at least that's kind of one way that it's talked about, right? If you are so far from doing anything good that you can't get any meaningful reward, then you get no signal, then you have nothing to learn from. So how do you get over that initial hump? Well, humans write custom reward functions for particular tasks. We know what we think we know. We have a sense of what good looks like. So if we can write a reward function to observe what you do and tell you how good it is, then our knowledge encoded through that reward function can be used as the basis for hopefully, getting you going in the early going. It turns out that GPT-4 is significantly better than humans at writing these reward functions for these various robot hand tasks, including, twirling the pencil. Significantly so, according to that paper. And this was striking to me because there really are no, when you think about writing reward functions, that's like by definition expert, right? There's not like any amateur reward function writers out there. This is like the kind of thing that the average person doesn't even know what it is, can't do it at all, is just totally going to give you a blank stare even at the whole subject. So you're into expert territory from the beginning. And to have GPT-4 exceed what the human experts can do just suggests that it's very rare. I have not seen many of these, but this is one where I would say, hey, there is GPT-4 doing something that, would you say that's beyond its training data? Probably, somewhat at least, right? Would you say it is an insight?
Seems insight adjacent.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, it's not obviously not an insight. So I had used this term of eureka moments, and I had said, for the longest time, no eureka moments. I'm now having to say precious few eureka moments because I at least feel like I have one example, and notably the paper is called Eureka. So that's definitely one to check out if you want to kind of see what I would consider like one of the frontier examples of GPT-4 outperforming human experts.
Medicine.
I mean, again, this is just exploding. It has not been long since MedPalm 2 was announced from Google, and this was, a multimodal model that is able to take in not just text, but also images, also genetic data, histology, images of like different kinds of images, right? Like X-rays, but also tissue slides, and answer questions using all these inputs, and to basically do it at roughly human level. On 8 out of 9 dimensions on which it was evaluated, it was preferred by human doctors to human doctors. So mostly the difference there was pretty narrow. So it would be also pretty fair to say it was like a tie across the board if you wanted to just round it. But in actual, blow by blow on the 9 dimensions, it did win 8 out of 9 of the dimensions. So that's medical question answering with multimodal inputs. That's a pretty big deal.
Isn't this just going to be an insanely useful product? Can't you? I mean, imagine how much all doctors earn across the world answering people's questions.
Yeah, it's wild.
Looking at looking at samples of things, getting test results, answering people's questions. You can automate that, it sounds like. I mean, maybe I'm missing. I get, there's going to be all kinds of legal issues and application issues, but it's just incredible.
Yeah, I think one likely scenario, which might be as good as we could hope for there, would be that human doctors prescribe, that would be kind of the fallback position of, get all your questions answered. But when it comes to actual treatment, then a human is going to have to review and sign off on it. That could make sense. I'm not even sure that necessarily is the best, but there's certainly a defense of it. So that's MedPalm 2. That has not been released. It is, according to Google, in kind of early testing with trusted partners, which I assume means like health systems or whatever. People used to say, why doesn't Google buy a hospital system? At this point, they really ought to, because just implementing this holistically through an entire, because there's obviously a lot of layers in a hospital system, that could make a ton of sense. And GPT-4 also, especially with vision now, is there too. I mean, it hasn't been out for very long, but there was just a paper announced in just the last couple of weeks where, there's a couple notable details here too, but they basically say, we evaluated GPT-4 V for vision, on challenging medical image cases across 69 clinico-pathological conferences. So, wide range of different things. It outperformed human respondents overall and across difficulty levels, skin tones, and all different image types except radiology, where it matched humans. So again, just, extreme breadth is one of the huge strengths of these systems. And that skin tones thing really jumped out at me, because that has been one of the big questions and challenges around these sorts of things. Like, maybe it's doing okay on these benchmarks, maybe it's doing okay on these cherry-picked examples, but, there's a lot of diversity in the world. What about people who look different? What about people who are different in any number of ways? We're starting to see those barriers, or maybe better to say, we're starting to see those thresholds crossed as well. So it's pretty, as kind of the AI doctor, is not far off, it seems. And then there's also, in terms of like biomedicine, the AlphaFold and the more recent expansion to AlphaFold is also just incredibly game-changing. There are now drugs in development that were kind of identified through AlphaFold.
Kids and artificial friends.
I've done one episode only so far with the CEO of Replica, the virtual friend company. And I came away with that with very mixed feelings. On the one hand, she started that company before language models. And she served a population and continues to, I think, largely serve a population that, has real challenges, right? I mean, many of them anyway, such that like, people are forming like very real attachment to things that are like very simplistic. And I kind of took away from that man, like people have real holes in their hearts, that if something that is as simple as like Replica 2022 can be something that you love, then like you are kind of starved for real connection. And that, was kind of sad, but I also felt like, hey, the world is rough for sure for a lot of people. And if this is helpful to these people, then, more power to them. But then the flip side of that is it's now getting really good. And so it's no longer just something that's like just good enough to soothe people who are, suffering in some way, but is probably getting to the point where it's going to be good enough to begin to really compete with normal relationships for otherwise normal people. And that too, could be really weird. For like parents, I would say ChatGPT is great. And I do love how ChatGPT, even just in the name, always kind of presents in this like robotic way and doesn't try to be your friend. It will be polite to you, but it doesn't like want to hang out with you.
Hey,
really.
Rob, how are you? How was your day?
Yeah, it's not bidding for your attention, right? It's just there to kind of help and try to be helpful, and that's that. But the replica will send you notifications. Hey, it's been a while. Let's chat. And as those continue to get better, I would definitely say to parents, like, get your kids ChatGPT, but watch out for virtual friends, because I think they now definitely can be engrossing enough that it, and maybe I'll end up looking back on this and being like, well, yeah, whatever, I was old fashioned at the time. But virtual friends are, I think, something to be developed with, again, extreme care. And if you're just like a profit maximizing app that's just like trying to drive your engagement numbers, just like early social media, right? You're going to end up in a pretty unhealthy place from the user standpoint. But I think social media, has come a long way, and, to Facebook or Meta's credit, they've done a lot of things to study well-being, and, they specifically like don't give, angry reactions weight in the feed, and that was a principled decision that like apparently went all the way up to Zuckerberg. Hey, look, we do get more engagement, from things that are getting angry reactions. And he was like, no, we're not waiting. We don't want more anger. Angry reactions, we will not reward with more engagement. Okay, boom, that's a policy. But I mean, they still got a lot to sort out. And in the virtual friend category, I just imagine that taking quite a while to get to a place where a virtual friend from, a VC app that's like pressured to grow is also going to find its way toward being a form factor that would actually be healthy for your kids. So I would hold off on that if I were a parent and I was able, and I could exercise that much control over my kids, which I know is not always a given.
Not
either.
always trivial.
Nowcasting versus forecasting.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Is it more worth forecasting where things will be in the future versus is it more valuable to spend an extra hour understanding where we stand right now? On the forecasting the future side, one mistake that I perceive some people as making is just looking at what's possible now and saying, well, I'm not really that worried about the things that GPT-4 can do. It seems like at best, it's capable of misdemeanors, or it's capable of speeding up some bad things that would happen anyway. So not much to see here. I'm not going to stress about this whole AI thing. And that seems like a big mistake to me, in as much as the person's not looking at all of the trajectory of where we might be in a couple of years' time. Worth paying attention to the present, but also worth projecting forward where we might be in future. On the other hand, the future is where we will live, but sadly predicting how it is challenging. So you end up, if you try to ask, what will language models be capable in 2027, you're kind of guessing. We all have to guess, so make informed speculation. Whereas if you focus on what they're capable of doing now, you can at least get a very concrete answer to that. So if the suggestions that you're making or the opinions that you have are inconsistent with what is already the case, with examples that you could just find if you went looking for them, then you could potentially very quickly fix mistakes that you're making in a way that someone merely speculating about how things might be in the future is not going to correct your views. And I guess especially just given how many new capabilities are coming online all the time, how many new applications people are developing, and how much space there is to explore what capabilities these enormous, very general models already have that we haven't even noticed. There's clearly just a lot of juice that one can get out of that. If someone's saying, I don't think that these models I'm not worried because I don't think they'll be capable of independently pursuing tasks. And then you can show them an example of a model at least beginning to independently pursue tasks, even if in a somewhat clumsy way, then that might be enough to get them to rethink the opinion that they have.
Yeah, I guess one quick comment on just predicting the future. I'm all for that kind of work as well, and I do find a lot of it pretty compelling. So I don't mean to suggest that my focus on kind of the present is at the exclusion or in conflict with understanding the future. If anything, hopefully better understanding of the present informs our understanding of the future. And the one thing that you said really is kind of my biggest motivation, which is just that I think in some sense, like the future is now, in that people have such a lack of understanding of what currently exists that, what they think is the future is actually here. And so if we could close the gap in understanding so that people did have a genuinely accurate understanding of what is happening now, I think they would have a healthier respect and even a little fear of what the future might hold. So it's kind of like, I think the present is compelling enough to get people's attention that you don't really you should project into the future, especially if you're like a decision maker in this space. But if you're just trying to get people to kind of wake up and pay attention, then I think the present is enough.
Plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.